You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. So, I live in Buffalo, New York, as most listeners of this podcast know by now. Buffalo is right on the border with southern Ontario, Canada, couched between Lake Erie and the Niagara River to our immediate west, Niagara Falls and Lake Ontario to our immediate north, and is a short 2-hour drive to downtown Toronto. I've been living here for about 5.5 years as of December 2023, and bit by bit, Buffalo has very much become home. Getting to know the local music scene here in Buffalo has been a gradual process, and I've begun to make connections locally in ways that connect to what I do here on this podcast about propaganda to people around me who also love this band, but also contribute to the local Buffalo scene. Recent episodes in this vein have featured Mark Miller from the band Holdout, who also has photographed propaganda many times over the years, Mike Hansen from the bands Hotel Etiquette and Pentimento, and Zach Shadle from the band Del Paxton. Buffalo has great stuff going on, and I'm delighted to welcome Griffin Coyne to the podcast from the Buffalo hardcore band Selfish Act and the Buffalo punk band G.O.A. Selfish Act sounds like this. God forbid I can follow where I live. Till this for my son, I love like you. Bite the fucking curtain out. And G.O.A. sounds like this. Griffin and I connected after I watched Selfish Act absolutely rock out at a small local show recently. And as a fellow teacher, it was great to connect with him. On this episode, we discuss Buffalo's scene and the propaganda songs Dear Coach's Corner, Without Love, and Devil's Creek. Enjoy. Griffin Coyne, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted that you're here, Griffin. I'm wondering if you can just spend a moment and introduce yourself to the listeners out there so they know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hi, so I am a native Buffalonian. I am a teacher. I teach high school English. Been doing it for 3 years now.
Nice.
But on top of that, I also play in a couple bands around here. I play in Selfish Act, which is a newer hardcore band.
Mm-hmm.
We started about maybe 9 months now. We've been playing all fall and with some big plans in the new year. So
Nice.
That's been a lot of fun, and it's cool because a lot of people have gotten behind us really quickly. And,
Yeah.
So we have some really big shows coming up, and yeah, can't wait for that to keep on running. And then my other band is G.O.A, which stands for Gentlemen of Age.
Nice.
Which I do counter because I'm 25 and everyone else is. One of them's 34 and the other two are 48. So
Nice.
It's an interesting range. But
That's a good range.
It is.
That's super fascinating. That's a really cool. There's got to be some cool conversations with an age range that wide in a band.
You think there would be, but it's funny. Like the two older guys, they're older friends of my parents, so it's it's pretty comfortable and cool. And it's funny. I kind of wish that they had a bigger age gap so we get like 20, 30, 40, 50, but unfortunately we will not.
Amazing.
But that one's fun. That's it's also hardcore, but it's more like first wave influence, so like more into like circle jerk stuff and like Black Flag and Descendants. So yeah, that one's a lot of fun. That's also got some cool stuff going on. We have like a compilation that's coming out in I think February for the No Effects 40 years, 40 songs thing going on.
Nice.
So that'll be cool. Yeah, we did an older No Effects hardcore song. So.
No way.
Yeah, so it's
cool.
Exciting.
Like, when do you know anything more about that release? Like when it's coming out? There's a lot of No Effects fans that listen to this podcast, obviously.
So it's on Coffin Curse Records, which is somewhere in Tennessee, I think, probably Nashville.
Nice.
And that should be out in February. We did Hold It Back off of the Maximum R&R record.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a fun one. And it's cool because there's not like an updated recording of that.
Yeah.
It's like for us, it was just like, we didn't have to do too much to make it our own, but it's cool to have like, newer technology recording that song.
Man, I'm telling you what, like some of my favorite cover songs on this show are the ones that people just they bring it into like a more modern feel.
Oh yeah.
And people make it their own and stuff like that. I just love covers for that kind of stuff where you can like, make something your own and bring it up to date and kind of make it feel like brand new all over again, hearing it in a brand new way. So I'm kind of excited to hear that because
that should be fun. Yeah.
That is some old stuff too.
Yes.
Yep. Nice. Okay. So I know you because how long have you been playing music, like in general?
Myself, probably like 13 to 15 years, somewhere in there.
Okay.
But with bands, I mean, it's taken me honestly like 10 years to find people who are like really wanted to do it. And then it was weird coming out of the pandemic with music.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first like real band that I had was around this time last year. I joined like this upstart like pop punk band called Volt Switch.
Mm-hmm.
And we played a couple shows in the late spring and fall, or it's not fall, summer, and then I left in fall, and it quickly dissolved after that. But Selfish Act was born out of that, and so yeah, that's where we came from.
Fantastic. I think that you're the singer in Selfish Act. The second I saw Selfish Act at that Amy's show with Pure Heel and Mark Miller's band.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh my gosh, that is the guy who was like pitting the entire night at the Gel show at the Italian restaurant Casa de Francesco whenever that show happened a few weeks back. So I was like, okay, so I going to a couple shows really close together. You really start to get a sense of how exciting, and tightly knit like the Buffalo hardcore and punk scene is at the moment. Like things are cool.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm just curious, like, as somebody who is like heavily involved in a band that is kind of well known in the local area right now, what are you excited about as far as like what's going on in Buffalo and the music scene right now?
Well, I mean, we had Spaced, who's huge.
Huge, love them.
They just got signed to Revelation, so that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening, like Revelation records are the ones that got me into hardcore.
Yeah.
So that was really cool to see. Exhibition's been on Triple B for a little while, so that's cool. So I mean, big labels looking at Buffalo, and then those bands getting on bigger tours and whatnot. So that's really cool. It's also, I mean, we have a million bands here right now that are all somewhat unique and also doing well. Someone posted this probably a week ago. I think it was maybe the Old Ghosts guys. And they like thanked every Buffalo hardcore band. I was counting. I'm like, there's like 26 names on here.
Yeah.
And they're all like, they all come to mind right away. It's not like, oh yeah, forget about that one. There's 26 bands that are like active and fun, and you actively are thinking about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really,
I mean, one of the bands, another one that was on that show that I saw with you guys at Amy's was Jewel Tone.
Oh my God. Yeah.
How crazy. How unbelievable is that band?
Right.
I like whenever I try to introduce people to Jewel Tone now, because I can't stop talking about it. It's like I feel like Jewel Tone could be like the next Turnstile. Yep. They've got like this like groove to them where you're watching them, you almost feel like you're at a hip hop show, but you've just got this tremendous groove behind it, but you are just rocking out to some fantastic hardcore. I mean, it's really a unique feel that band has kind of like gotten into. And I've enjoyed Christian's work in Hotel Etiquette, playing drums for them as well, and so it's like just really cool to see what's going on. I'm just loving it.
Oh no, I mean, one of the first times I really met Christian, just chatted with him, I was saying to him, like, not even just as we're both in the same scene kind of thing, but as like just a fan. That's exactly what I think of when I'm like, I want to hear this kind of hardcore, and it's like, there it is.
Yeah, I know.
Now the hip hop feels funny because I think I'm getting names correct. Neff, the singer, he does hip hop as well.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, he's got some cool stuff out there too.
I should check that out.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Selfish Act a little bit. I've been listening to the demo a ton lately, and I just love the fact that it's like Buffalo 716 hardcore, like immediately on the first track. But then something that really stands out to me about that band is that it's almost got like shredding guitars. I mean, It's just it's super speedy and like riffy hardcore like you would expect, but it's also got this like almost like suicidal tendencies, like shredding guitar solos underneath it like half of the time, and I'm just like, wow, this is so fascinating. Tell me a little bit about that. What's going on with what you're excited about with that band? Because I'm just like picking up on some really cool little details that I'm loving about your band.
So that band kind of came out of I guess I'll call them the premature ashes of Volt Switch. The drummer and I both realized that we loved hardcore, and so we started talking about it. And around like April-ish, we decided let's just start like a side project thing. And he wanted to play bass. He reached out to a few people he knew, and that's how the band came together. But my thought from the get-go was I love like 90s and early 2000s hardcore, so I want those kind of like riffs, which are, a lot of bands have that going on, but I want someone else just shredding the whole time. And we had someone else originally who just didn't fit the image very well. Had a little more of like a rock star, ambition, or we're just trying to play like, small little venues and like just have fun.
Yeah.
And so then we landed on this other guy. He actually filled in for Volt Switch, but his name's Josh. And Josh has absolutely no history in hardcore, unlike everyone else. And at first, I mean, it seems like kind of like a potential detriment, but he came in and he has a different perspective, and he throws those things in there, and it fits perfectly.
Nice.
Because he's just making it for the first time. I mean, he's here at the bands, and now he's getting into the rhythm, and he knows what's going on. But like a lot of it is, I'm throwing out this lead that I don't know if this fits in the music, and here it goes, and it's really cool.
I love it. What do you all have a lot of new tunes in the works, like beyond the demo and stuff? You working on some stuff?
So we just recorded 2 songs with John from Spaced. Those will be coming out. I don't know how much I'm supposed to release or whatever, and it's not that it really matters. One's a cover of a Chokehold song,
cool,
which is one of my biggest inspirations. They're amazing. And then the other one's an original. It's actually a remix of our first song that after we played it a few times, we realized we didn't really like it as much, so we played it back around, and I like this new version. It's probably our best work so far.
I love that.
So that should be out in January some point. I don't know what the deal is with like the streaming services. It'll be out physically some way.
Cool.
And then in early January, we're going to record a 5 or 6 song EP that will hopefully have out sometime in the late spring, early summer.
Amazing. Well, those are some awesome plans. I'm excited because, something that I've been doing on this podcast a lot more lately is you may have picked up over the years of like, if you listen to the show, that I'm not from here originally. I'm from Missouri. And through a series of random life events, I wound up here in my mid 30s with a family in 2018. So what I've realized is that I need to become more a part of the community, because I'm going to be here for, as far as I can tell, forever.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So lately, I've just been having a blast doing a lot more local stuff with this podcast, like shining a light on like the work that Mark Miller's doing, because he has a long history of photographing Propaganda back to the 90s. And then Mike Hansen from Pentimento and Hotel Etiquette was on the show. He's a huge fan. Zach Shadle from Del Paxton was recently here. And so I am just loving finding these like little like pockets of Buffalo that love Propaganda, and I can bring into the fold of this little family of what I've tried to do on this podcast, but also get myself like a little more recognizable. So like when I go to shows, I can be like, oh, there's Griffin, there's Mark, there's Zach. And this is kind of my way of like trying to highlight what's going on in Buffalo and like make myself a little more out there, put myself out there a little bit,
I know, we absolutely appreciate it, and I hope this means we can like make a push to get them to come back here.
That would be great.
I've never had the chance to see them.
Oh, that was going to be one of my questions, so we can just go ahead and like nix that one from the questions list. I love it.
Unfortunately, sorry.
Well, Griffin, let's chat about and if you and my cat is here, so if you don't want the cats, just go ahead and knock them.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. Oh, and his name's Chris as well, by the way, which
nice.
Is
what is that?
Oh yeah,
intentionally.
Oh, it's intentional. Yeah, and it's not an accident. And I mean, Chris Hanna from Propaganda named his cat after Kronos from Venom.
Right.
So I was like, well, obviously, I have to name my cat after Chris now. So
and my next cat, I will name after you. There we go.
There we go. So we can have Greg, we can have Chris, we can have and then my other cat is Eleanor. She has nothing to do with any of the Propaganda stuff that I do here. But my daughter named Eleanor, and I got to name Chris. So it was our negotiation where she picked one and I picked the other. And he's kind of a little he's my shenanigans master over here. Yes, he is.
Perfect.
So I love when Chris gets to make an appearance on the podcast. Okay, so Griffin, tell me a little bit about when you first remember hearing Propaganda for the first time.
Yeah, so I guess I'll also add like some of my like getting into punk in general.
Great backstory. Love it.
Yeah, so my parents are all into it. It's funny, the guys in G.O.A like to joke that we're legacy acts.
Your parents are into punk also?
Yes.
So you got into good music because of your parents?
Absolutely, yep.
Dude, that's the coolest story ever. I don't know if anybody's ever said that on this podcast before, by the way.
Awesome.
I think you might be the first one.
Sweet. So yeah, I mean, it was always something that was around me growing up. My mom like listens to more like classic rock, so that was probably what I was, really indoctrinated with early on. But once I got into punk, probably like 10, 11, I started to realize like, oh no, I like this is what they listen to that I like.
How old are your parents?
They are 48.
48. Okay, so I'm 40, so they're really not that much older than me if you think about it. Yeah. So they would have been around for like the 94 punk explosion, like in like prime age too.
Oh, and they were already into it before then.
Love it.
Like my dad especially, he with the Buffalo hardcore scene, I should say, like he was big into like Zero Tolerance and
no way
as a Snapcase. So that was always like part of like it was in the car when we were driving around when I was younger and stuff, and to this day.
Amazing.
So that was huge for me. My stepdad, I'll put him on blast a little bit. I don't know if you ever listened to this, but he liked really shitty like early 2000s pop punk stuff, which for me, like hearing a lot more classic rock from my mom, I was like, all right, this is cool.
Yeah.
And then I started I'm like, that's a little cheesy. And then I got into more like Lagwagon through him and
Sweet.
No Effects, and I'm like, okay, this is what I really like.
Yeah.
So No Effects was like my big explosion, anything Fat Records related.
Yeah.
So then I found, I had like a podcast or a iPod when I was younger, and it had like Ska Sucks on it probably.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. I loved that song. Then I got into How to Clean Everything, and that was blew me away. It was, with the exception of like So Long, No Effects. That's probably my favorite Fat Records release.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that just blew me away. I loved that, and then wasn't until I was getting like late high school or college that I really started to explore the rest of their catalog, and then I really loved like the mid 2000s or 2010s propaganda stuff.
Nice.
That's where I went.
So were you a pretty consistent fan the whole time?
I was, from the start, I was really into the early stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to like the hits, like the like Back to the Motor League,
sure,
Dear Coach's Corner, but I consistently loved How to Clean Everything, and then I got really into it, the rest of it later on.
Nice. Okay, good. You sent me some songs whenever we were, talking about doing this podcast, and I love giving people homework because it like really. I was like, okay, you can pick 3 songs, and it really makes some people panic.
Oh, yeah.
Like as far as like choosing their 3 that they really want to dive into, and you picked some good ones here. I'm pretty excited about it. You picked one of my favorite songs of theirs ever. Well, actually, 2 of my favorite ever. So I'm really excited about this. But you seem to have an appreciation for like a mid-era propaganda with Beeve. Yeah. You picked songs from Failed States and songs from Supporting Cast. Tell me a little bit about your appreciation of the Beeve era.
So, I mean, I have to say I love the early stuff. I mean, it's the punk that I grew up with, but I think I had an appreciation for like the recording of it, and that's what like kind of stuck with me because, I mean, it's once Supporting Cast came before, right?
Yeah, Supporting Cast is 09.
Yeah, so that as soon as that hit, that's it sounds great. It's
awesome. Blasting Room, Bill Stevenson, Jason Livermore. I mean, it's like, and it's their only record that they did in the Blasting Room as well. So Supporting Cast has like a different feel than all the rest of the records. I know that they've mastered and mixed and stuff at the Blasting Room, but like there's something about that, the way that Supporting Cast sounds to me, that's just a little different than all the other ones.
Well, in preparing for this, I was kind of thinking about putting it into words, and like for me, like How to Clean Everything in my head is just a Chris record, right? Mm-hmm. That's what he listens to. This is what he puts forward. And then today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, that you can hear the songs where it's like, this is a Chris song, that's a Todd song, and then like the ones that come together, and it's awesome because I like Todd's awesome because he's got like the hardcore stuff, and that's my like bread and butter. But going back and forth from song to song on that record, it's you kind of get to that all right, this is his song, right, his song, and once you get to Supporting Cast, you're just like, okay, this is just, here you go.
Yeah.
Even with Night Letters as the opener, right? So like the opening riff where it's like that drum beat that's like a little too slow to be punk and a little too fast to be like, doomy hardcore. It's like, okay, this is something a different direction. Then you get the Chris licks in there and it's like, okay, this is amazing.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the second the Night Letters came on the first time I ever heard it, I remember exactly where I was. I was in my tiny little apartment in Guildford, England.
Wow.
When I was teaching abroad in 2009. I got the UK edition from Hassel Records. I had the shirt pre-order where the boots are stomping on the human faces, and I'll never forget being like, this is a different band now.
Oh yeah.
And just the addition of Beeve with the second guitar was just this like profound shift where once that riff came in with the and it just hit me in a way that I was like, this is my favorite record of all time. And I was like a minute into the record. It was like no question for me. And to this day, it still remains my favorite record of theirs entirely. I can't get over it. I can't get over how perfect it is. So, yeah. And then 3 years later, 2012, Failed States. Tell me a little bit about what you think about Failed States kind of as a whole.
So that one, I mean, for me, it's again, like Supporting Cast was that perfect, like here's Propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Failed States is just a continuation of that for me. There's a lot of... So I guess this is kind of a breakdown. Like I've always listened to music in a time where I could just access a song.
Mm-hmm.
So like, when I was younger, I would just pick something, and when you want to change it, you change it.
Yeah.
So I didn't listen to Failed States until I got it on vinyl.
Interesting.
And my relationship with vinyl is whole album.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a lot more of a... I love Failed States as a complete piece,
mm-hmm.
And it's something I almost exclusively listen to as a complete piece.
Nice.
So like the individual song aspect, it means... Did I pick Devil's Creek off?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that song in particular, but for me, like, there's not a lot of other songs on there where I'm going, okay, I love this song. It's just a whole piece that I really love. So,
yeah.
Unlike Supporting Cast, where I think I can pick out a lot more songs.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So you like some of the songs on Supporting Cast as like being like absolutely perfect, but that you think that Failed States kind of is a little more of a cohesiveness,
Yes.
like all the way through?
Yep.
Interesting. I like that. You just said something really interesting as well. About the generational gap in the way that people consume music. So I'm 40, you're 25.
Right.
So we definitely have found music in a little bit different of ways. Like we must have. Like I was getting like the Warped Tour compilations, the Fat Records compilations, Punk-O-Rama, like all of those. And then you have to get one song and then you listen to it over and over and over. And then you save up $12 to $15 and then you go back to the CD store that your mom has to drive you to. And then you have to go in there and see if they have it, and then if they don't, you have to special order it, and then you have to wait for it to come in, and then they call you, and then you have to get a ride back over there. Like, does that resonate at all, like with your experience of music, or has it been a lot more of a much more accessible thing for you in the way that you consume music over the last like 10 years?
So I mean, both. I had like an iPod and YouTube and all that, so I had access to things immediately. But my parents collected vinyl, or I guess my mom really. So I got into vinyl probably around the same time I got into music in general, or like 12-ish. And so like I had that relationship where it's like, okay, I'm looking online, like where can I get this? And
Yeah.
The big store around here for a while was Record Theater until it closed. So like my mom would go to Record Theater, and before that Spiral Scratch, which was huge. What's another big one? Oh, those were the big two when I was getting into it. But like I remember I picked up one of the first trip we ever went to the store. I got I Don't Want to Grow Up and Rocket to Russia.
Sweet.
And that was awesome.
Yeah.
And I think the next one I got like the reissues they did however long ago. So that was really cool. So for me, like I had that relationship where picking up vinyl was delayed, and you had to wait till you got this much money and got to the store.
Yeah.
They had it, and you had to special order that. And it's so funny because there's so many records like during that era, because those Record Theater especially didn't carry all of, like the specialized punk and hardcore stuff I liked. So there's a lot of like sending away, and like Discogs was just coming out and all that. And it's funny because now I'll plug them real quick because I love the store, Out There Records on Delaware.
Oh yeah.
He has. I was just telling him this like probably a month ago. He has every record I'd special ordered from like 12 to 22.
Nice.
I'm like, where was the store when I was a kid?
Man, I haven't been there yet. I've been to Black Dots, I've been to Revolver, I've been to those stores a bunch of times, but I haven't actually been to out there yet.
It's amazing. He's Jared's awesome. I think I've almost every Propaganda record I got from him, with the exception of How to Clean Everything and today's Empires.
Was he collaborating with Steven from Gutter Pop Comics for a while as well?
He may have been. I didn't know them that far back, but it seems that would make a lot of sense.
Because I feel like wasn't out there. Didn't they have a location before the one they're in now on Hurdle? Were they on Hurdle for a while?
They did. They're a few blocks up from Gutter Pop, though.
Okay, sweet.
So
I think that they were doing like some vinyl in Gutter Pop, and then they got the new location, and then they moved over to the one on Delaware.
Okay, so I remember.
I hope I'm thinking of the same guy, or this is all just going to sound so idiotic.
Well, I do remember before Gutter Pop moved to Hurdle, they were on Elmwood, and he had vinyl in there. And I remember that's actually where I got. Funny enough, I got one of Mark Miller's records there.
Amazing.
7-inch, and I also got some of Steven, who runs Gutter Pop.
Did he get you some Mall Walkers records?
They're amazing.
Dude, the Mall Walkers were like the first local Buffalo band I ever saw. They opened for the Mesthetics, that Fugazi.
I think I was there too, yeah.
In the basement?
Yep.
When Mall Walkers opened for Mesthetics, like Mall Walkers came out and I was completely blown away.
Yep.
Like their funk, punk, ska, fusion, double, like woman lead singer, man lead singer, like double, like vocal approach was absolutely mind blowing to me. And like Mall Walkers, man, huge shout out to them.
Yes.
And Personal Style, Steven's current band, excellent. And like I came up to Steven at the end of that show and I was like, dude, your bass playing reminds me of a mixture of Scott from Face to Face and Rob from No Means No and Carl from The Descendants. And he's like, that's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. And I was like, well, I mean it, buddy. And then Steven and I have gotten to chat a bunch of times in the store, but he's also like one of the guys who works at Gutter Pop plays in Skyway, that new skate punk band.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so Andrew from Skyway works over at Gutter Pop now. So we're just getting all in the weeds of local Buffalo stuff right now. All right, so let's bring it back.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Tell me, so your first song that you chose from your list is Dear Coach's Corner.
Yes.
You've kind of talked to me a little bit about what supporting cast means to you as a whole, and I'm just wondering if you can tell me a little bit about what it is about Dear Coach's Corner that made you add it to your top 3.
So, I mean, first off, I grew up in and still a big hockey fan.
Nice.
Despite the turmoil that the Zebras are.
They are having a hard time right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
They've almost always.
Yeah. I mean, they're not re-signing Danny Briere was like the turning point of the franchise almost.
And it's not to get off topic once again, but I always say, like, I grew up in that time where they were awesome, like when Danny Briere is here, and when you're 10. You go for whatever sport's most popular. So that was hockey for me, and like football kind of sucks. So it's cool that it's coming around now. And I'm getting into it now, but so Dear Coach's Corner from the beginning, just the addressing Hockey Night in Canada, grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
No matter what the subject was going to be, but from there, just the story about taking his niece, I think, right, to the hockey game. My family is all very progressive and leftist and whatnot. So, like, for us, when you have, like, the soldiers coming down, the wires, it's like, all right, we don't really like this. Or, like, the standing up and clapping for the troops. And it's like, why are we getting this free, Like, all that kind of stuff was always, like, bothersome to us. So it was cool to, like, have this identity with what I already knew was a progressive band because of how explicit How to Clean Everything is. But, like, seeing this come through in a song that was aimed towards the sport that I love, too.
Sure.
From a fellow fan. Was awesome. But it's so funny, like, I was an English major in college, and there's a lot of competition to be, like, correct about, like, this book and this interpretation and stuff. And for me, music was always something that was very personal. So I wasn't a big, like, lyric explorer. I listened, and I came up with my own lyrics sometimes when I, like, couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
So this song, I had it marked down, but I didn't bring it with me. I have 3 instances of misheard lyrics that I think are
love
funny.
this.
So if I'm going through... So what we have with what everybody knows is in the end a kid's game. I always heard King's Game.
Ooh.
And for me, I had this like identity because growing up how we did, like I couldn't afford to play ice hockey. Like it's so out of reach for anyone who doesn't have that sort of access.
Yeah, the gear is crazy.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure that Propaganda does come from a similar background in that regard. Maybe not with hockey because it's, a wider spread thing up there. But for me, it's like, yeah, hockey is like an unreachable thing, even though we enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a cool like identity thing for me. Which of course in a kid's game is also a great lyric too.
Right.
What's the other great one?
Well, and another thing about the Kings, while you're looking for the next one, is that, the huge controversy of Wayne Gretzky leaving the Edmonton Oilers and going to play in Los Angeles for the Kings is a nice little thing, too, because Propaganda is well known as having seen Wayne Gretzky at the airport when they went to Los Angeles to record How to Clean Everything. So we're just going to go ahead and throw that little tidbit in there as well.
I didn't hear that until I watched that Fat Records documentary, and that was awesome, yeah.
It's streaming for free. Like,
is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually put it on the other day. I was like, you know what? I was kind of sick. I was not feeling well, and I was like, I'm going to watch a Fat Rec again. So I did, and it was a great time.
It's awesome, and I love that the way he addresses the call out from Propaganda. Which I just realized I'm saying it wrong.
No, you're not.
I'm not? Okay.
Say it however you want. I always, whenever it's come up on the show so many times and it cracks me up every single time.
That's what's throwing me off.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just say it how it naturally comes off your tongue.
So the next one I had in here is we both love this game so much we can hardly fucking stand it. I always heard we both follow the script so much we can hardly fucking stand it.
Interesting.
And I was like, okay, because I knew like that there's like an interesting relationship between Chris and playing live, right?
He does not like it.
Right. So in my head, I always process that as like, okay, he doesn't like this process of having to play the songs in a certain order, in a certain way for like people to make them like it.
Interesting.
And I also thought about the same thing for the producers of the show because, I mean, with the lapel thing and all that, which I cannot stand.
Yeah.
Not to, I don't know what. I'm sure we have a similar feeling amongst the audience, but who knows? I just thought, there's all these compulsory things that they have to do as producers of this huge, producers and commentators on this huge sport there.
Right.
So this like identity thing where it's like, okay, we have these things we have to go through that are mundane. But also we both love this game so much we can hardly fuck hands. That also makes sense. Just, but it's also an odd unity point between two people who are so, opposed, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and then the last one, gotta find this here too.
Something that's so interesting about you mentioned like the being in a progressive family and watching soldiers come down and processing that. Because so many times people will say to sports players, just shut up and play. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so the people who say that seem to be the exact same people that would be infuriated if you didn't stand up while the troop thing was happening. Yep. And I'm just like, you can't have it both ways.
No.
You know what I mean? And so that's one of the things like that really jumps out to me about the way that your family watching hockey as politically progressively minded people, seeing this like military thing and being like, man, if the players express their opinions on what is happening right now, a huge portion of the people would be they would be very disappointed in the players' opinions on what was happening. And they would be the exact same kinds of people that would tell you to stand up and, be respectful and things like that, which is a really fascinating conundrum when you think about the NHL doing things that will inherently create the crowds to be angry at each other.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
The Pride Tape thing recently.
Yeah.
They're just jumping back and forth, and it's something that's so simple. Like, for me, like social rights are non-political.
Right.
Like, why can't you have rainbow tape on your stick?
Yeah.
Why is this a thing?
Yeah, and then there was like huge arguments about like Marc-Andre Fleury's like goalie mask that he came into, and I'm like, man, the NHL is uniquely good at getting people in their fan base to fight with each other.
Right.
And be angry at the league. It's really an interesting trend that they keep pursuing.
And it's as a Sabres fan a few years ago when Leonard was on the team, I don't know where he's from, but he's not from the United States, and he got like a God bless Trump or something like that painted on his mask. I remember that being a big thing for me, but I'm like looking online and I'm like, oh, nobody else agrees with me here. Like, we're in the minority here.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was another bothersome thing from there. But I remember watching, I don't remember who recorded it, but it was that Fast and Propaganda played, and he introduced Resisting Tyrannical Government was saying, like, this song goes out to my favorite jock. And he's like, there's not many of them.
Yeah.
But, for Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, so many people, like, still to this day with him talking about how terrible he was and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. I thought he was pretty good until you didn't like, him kneeling.
Yeah. Until you don't like the one thing, and then all of a sudden he's complete trash.
Yes. And I love that whole situation too, because not that this really matters to me, but like he got permission from, I don't know if you've ever heard this, like he got permission from a veteran. He said, well, I fought for you to have the right to do that. So the most respectful thing you could do is just kneel and move on with your day.
Interesting.
So it's funny that these people are like, oh, you're disrespecting the veterans. It's like, no, I actually cleared it with one of them. And,
Yeah, selective outrage.
Yes.
And there's so much to be mad about all of the time, and then we find our one hill that we're going to die on.
Absolutely.
Did you have a third misheard lyric?
I did. I just got it. So, how do I protect her from this cult of death?
Oh.
I heard cultural death.
Oh.
And that drove my perspective on sports for 5 years until I reread this lyric, and I'm like, oh, cult of death, which also lands up. But cultural death, I mean, we are spending all this money and all this time sitting and watching other people be active, and as much as I enjoy doing it too, it is to such a degree a cultural death. Like we're just, it's complacency.
Yeah.
Or like it takes up your energy, your feelings, especially here. Like we've had so much heartbreak. It's like, why am I letting this affect my day? Which it doesn't anymore. I don't really care at the end of the day. But but there's definitely times where it's like you really get bothered, and like you have these high strung emotions here based off sports.
Mm-hmm. Buffalo is a pretty unique place in that regard, because like being from St. Louis, like the St. Louis Cardinals have won the World Series the second most amount of times in the entire major leagues. The Blues finally won the Stanley Cup a few years back in like their 52nd season or something like that. So the place that I'm from has a little bit less of a sports, like, and then the Rams won the Super Bowl like the second year they were in the city or something like that in the 90s. And so it's like where I'm from has a little bit different of a feel as far as like sporting tragedy. You know what I mean? But Buffalo is pretty unique in that regard. And then the fact that like the weather here is like pretty hard to tolerate, like 7 months a year, is another unique aspect of this city that drives people into that complacency as well, where we're all just kind of like hiding away, and consuming the things that come through the TV at us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I would say about this song, in general, is I feel a bit of a tie between like his relationship taking his niece into the sporting event where you kind of just have to be a part of this culture.
Yeah.
And then comparing that to teaching. I mean, every day. It's funny. Like I went to a charter school where I don't know how many of the rules were followed. But like we didn't do the pledge ever. And I remember my first time, like when I was doing my student teaching, it was during COVID. So like everything was odd. But my first year where I was in my classroom for the first time, I'm running my homeroom and I'm like getting used to things. And all of a sudden they like go on announcements and do, and all the kids stand up. And I'm like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
And I'm like sitting down and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I got up and then like, I did some research and I'm like, oh, I don't have to do this. And I told the kids, I'm like, hey, you guys, no, you don't have to do it unless you really want to.
Yeah.
It went from like 30 kids to like 2.
Did that gain you any pushback emails or anything like that?
No, I mean, there is a funny story that I'll leave off air. Not a funny story. It's actually horrific about a former principal at our school in that whole situation, but not related to me. And yeah, there's very little accountability, so I don't think anyone realizes.
The way that I would handle the pledge when I was a teacher in Missouri is that I would stand at the very front of the room, directly under the flag. So I would be at the very front of the room, facing like within a foot of the wall. Right? Yeah. So I can't see what any students are doing behind me. Whatever they did is completely private to them. They can't see my face. They can't see my hands. I would just kind of like put my hands like in front of my stomach here. So they really couldn't see what I was doing, other than the fact that I was standing at the very front of the room staring at the wall.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see what they were doing at all. So it was completely personal to them, and I had no idea what they were doing.
That's so funny. So my current class, I have an AP class first period, which is a blessing. Because,
the best.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we have a very strong JARA OTC program at our school, which I know a lot of people think is great because it helps the kids with their structure and whatnot. I'm personally opposed to that sort of, structure. So we have some kids on Wednesdays, they have to dress up.
Mm-hmm.
And so these kids will not stand any day except for Wednesdays. They're like, well, what if a sergeant walks by? And I'm like, he's not walking by to check if you're doing the flag. Sure enough, they do sometimes. Yeah. I mean, so that was unsettling, but
Interesting.
But no one cares.
Interesting. All right. Let's chat about another tune.
Yes.
Let's go to Without Love, also from supporting cast. An unbelievable song. I would say that you would have a very difficult time finding a Propaganda fan who did not love this song.
Oh, yeah.
It is a staple of their live set. Ever since this album came out, Chris has gone into long discussion on his own podcast on Patreon about this song and what it means to him and what it meant to him when he was writing it. And so I'm wondering what it is about this song, why you chose it, and tell me a little bit about why you like it.
So their classic, I mean, the abruptness in the music is something I've always loved. And it's always been a little like, not when I say rough, I mean that as a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Their entire discography up to this point. This is the first song where I thought it was just like perfectly executed from a musician's standpoint. And it's so tight and it blends with like the lyrics so well. The riffs are awesome. This is just one of those songs that like there's other songs on this record that stick out to me, but this is one where this is perfect musically for me, which is not something that is a standard of mine, but it stuck out to me, and then also the relationship with pets. I mean, you can't separate that. As soon as I heard that, it's like my girlfriend and I have a dog and 2 cats, and I feel 100% the same. And I was also thinking about this more like with the lyrics. With pets, it's like the only relationship in life that you enter with the expectation that it's like finite, and that's horrific to me.
Yeah.
But despite it being that, like you still have these very intense feelings towards them, like that the line like I pleaded with the world to take my life instead of hers.
Yeah.
Like I have very intense feelings of that towards my pets too. Like I know if someone, like did something to my dog, I would go crazy. And despite this being a finite thing, which I think just that aspect of the song, the muse for the song is so beautiful in that regard. Also just is breathing just the ticking of an unwinding clock. Like really, in hardcore, there's that like PMA aspect, or like the Gorilla Biscuits have like Start Today. And this one's almost more motivating to me because for those, it's like, all right, let's get active. And this one's like, no. Think about the opposite. Like if you're just sitting there and breathing and moving on and processing every moment, like we're still ticking away.
Yeah. You're one breath closer to the end, no matter how you think about it. You know what I mean? It's like you can be positive, but you can also still understand that every minute that goes by is one less minute that you had a chance to do something in your life. So like, whenever we all get into our complacent modes where we just like, binge an entire series on Peacock or something, it's like, well, there go 400 minutes that I will never have the chance to live again.
Absolutely.
And in the moment, we all need what we need. Right. You know what I mean? And if those minutes are spent in a way that are helpful and rejuvenating to you, then that's great.
Right.
I don't judge anybody as far as like how they choose to spend their time, but it's important to also acknowledge the inability to relive all of those minutes.
Yes. And especially, I mean, I don't know how exact I haven't listened to any of those podcasts, which I will check out now.
Totally fine.
Existed. Just the moments of like with a pet who's passing away.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a sad story that I'll get into real quick.
That's fine.
But my like we had a childhood dog when I was younger who lived, like 10, 12 years. So when I was 10, 12, that's when I dealt with, losing that pet.
Yeah.
And then shortly before that, we had gotten a golden retriever, and he was amazing. His name was Obi. Like the best dog ever.
Yeah.
Like he's one where you could like, on a city street, He didn't need a leash. He would be glued to your side.
Yeah.
Not that I love doing that, because I'm horrified by that too.
Yeah.
But my first job was at a Walgreens, and I moved up through like being a cashier and a pharmacy technician and all this stuff into being a manager.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Sunday evening, maybe a day or two earlier. I'd already moved out. I was probably 19 or 20 at the time. My mom called me. She's like, "Hey, like Obi's not doing awesome. So like, we were spending a lot of time with him." And that Sunday night came, and like they decided to do like the they come to your house thing, which is a million times better than I didn't realize this was a thing, and it's a really, they do an amazing job with those things. But for me, I think they were coming at like 6:30. I had to work at 4, and we were there from like the night before until 4. And it was like, spending every one of those seconds really honing down, like that breathing, the ticking down, and then like, trying to get someone to cover me, and no one would take my shift. And I couldn't call off or I'd be fired, which in hindsight, I should have just left. But like losing that 2.5 hours to me is like a very intense thing that I still think about.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, geez. Yeah. When we moved here in 2018, we had 3 dogs and a cat that we brought with us from Missouri. Oh, yeah. And we've lost all of them now.
Yeah.
3 dogs and a cat that we brought from Missouri in 2018. It's now, the end of 2023, and all of those animals are gone.
Right.
And so my daughter, who's 10, has lost 4 pets.
Oh my God, yeah.
And before she was 9.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's pretty intense. And last winter, about a year ago, I was having some work done on the house here, and Chris, the cat that was on your lap a little while ago, got out.
Oh no. Yeah.
And he'd never been out before. I had only been living in this house for a couple of months at the time. And one of the guy who was doing the work on the house was like, "Hey, your little cat got out."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What?" And so I was in the street and screaming, "Chrissy, Chrissy!" Screaming.
Right.
My neighbors were all coming out, and they were like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "My cat is gone. He doesn't know where he lives." Like I was like delirious, like losing my mind. And it wasn't really until that moment that I realized how much that little jerk matters to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like he'd never been out. I'd come home and I'd be like, "Oh, hey Chris, how's it going?" I'd give him little scratches, and he'd like sit on the couch next to me and stuff. But it wasn't until he was gone that I really processed that I would never see him again, where I was like, "Oh man, this cat matters to me a lot more than I ever really knew." So the fact that he came back was super awesome, but also like such a relief, because I was going through it. And so now I am like obsessive about these cats not leaving this house. It drives me crazy.
Oh yes.
Just 100%. To think about. Amazing. Any other connections to Without Love? Or you feel good about that?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. Really the line is breathing, just ticking. I mean, that's the one that just sticks with me nonstop.
It's like a mantra almost.
Yes,
it is absolutely. Like a mantra reminder of like, you get so much time, because like, turning 40 recently, like I think all about like the mortality aspect now. And, it's, I try to stay healthy and everything, but you get to be 40 years old and you're like, man, you never know. You never know. So this is a good conversation for me to have, to kind of think about like where I want to go in the next 10 years, like given the opportunity that I actually make it like to 50, you know what I mean? And then it's like, there's those little reassessments in life that the older you get, the more you start to think about, And
it's funny. I mean, like, not to, over compliment the people around me, but with my parents not being that much older than me, I mean, I think they were in their early 20s when they had me.
Yeah.
I don't see them as like in their 40s.
Right.
Or almost 50s. Like, they still have that kind of like, I feel like people just in general are getting younger and younger.
Yeah.
As they grow up.
It's awesome like that your parents are so young, and that you all have similar interests. Like, what a gift.
And I think, I mean, on top of it, I feel like a lot of it has to be the way you look at life in this music too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people in the scene who are, I can speak for the G.O.A. guys, who are like old, are not old.
Yeah.
And it's so cool.
Nice. Well, let's chat about Devil's Creek. Let's go to the next record. You already talked about like why Failed States matters to you, kind of as like a whole, right? I think that was really nicely said. The way that you feel that failed states is like a really nice comprehensive package.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked those thoughts that you offered on it. Tell me a little bit about why you singled out Devil's Creek on this record.
So this is gonna be a little funny, and I don't always love admitting this to people, but I told you a little bit about this. I love fishing,
Mm-hmm.
and I say that as someone who I'll give myself a quick plug is progressive and is not doesn't carry the typical beliefs of most people out there.
Sure.
And I always make the joke, it's like when you see somebody out, you're like, I don't want to hear from you. If you see like a Trump car, you park a little further away. But like I really love just landscapes. I grew up camping a lot with my stepdad, like doing backpacking the Adirondacks, and I love that. And one time I was going with my dad. I think it was his first time backpacking, and he's been into fishing for a little while. And so it was like the opening of trout season, and I was just sitting with him while he was fishing, and I'm like, why don't I get into this too? Because it gives me an excuse to go out and like put waders on and just like march through a creek and enjoy that space with a reason, rather than just like I'm standing in this like mile zone for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the word creek really stuck out, which is kind of funny. But I also, when I was looking at the lyrics, I think about us in Western New York, and there's always like a joke where when we think of a lake, it's comparable to like what someone else thinks of as an ocean or a huge sea. Like I was having this conversation with my mom over the summer where I was going out kayaking. She's like, so where are you going? Like, are you going somewhere like you can see the other side? And I'm like, yeah. Like I'm going to a lake. And she's like, well, Lake Erie, you can't see. It looks like an ocean. So when I read the lyrics here and you have the like, the drainage ditch comment.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of a drainage ditch, and I've always thought of it this way, as just a small creek, and that small creek that I call a drainage ditch to other people is a river. So when you sent me that, it was probably like a month or so ago, the coordinates of this Devil's Creek, I looked at it and I'm like, that's an actual drainage ditch.
It is. It's a drainage ditch for sure. I'm so glad I sent you that. Oh my gosh.
So that
I totally forgot I did
perspective. That. I'd never, I don't think about things in those terms. So for me, this is such an amazing like a landscape-esque song, because he talks about the drainage ditch first off, and then also next to the base. And my dad lives in the middle of Pennsylvania, and it's beautiful down there.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of streams, but everything is connected to a prison. And there's a quick connection between a military base and a prison. And I didn't have this realization. We went to this, I think it's called Spring Creek. And we were hiking, and all of a sudden there's a spot you can't keep going, and then there's like, warnings of inmates. And I'm like, what is this? And he's like, oh, that's the state prison. And I'm like, that's insane that we're wasting this beautiful space on a prison. Although I did hear that I guess they do let some inmates go and fish. Like
interesting.
It's like the well behaved. So I think that's a good like rehabilitation, method. But for the rest of us, just the fact that we have this like imposing, horrendous space on top of our natural resources is unfortunate. And I think about the same thing for him as a kid going to a creek. Like I think about myself going to one where it's just, kind of rejuvenating and also comfortable. And then all of a sudden you have, okay, here's the military base, or here's the prison right there. And then also for here, I love the lyrics about not being understood by the other kids, which for me, I have a lot of friends from high school. I never felt like I was outcasted in that sense, but like I was saying before, it took me like 10, 15 years to find people who wanted to play in a band like this. And I remember going to shows when I was younger and like bringing a friend who wanted to go once, I had a good time and never wanted to go again.
Yeah.
And it's cool now because I have like the Selfish Jack guys who want to go to every show together.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So it was, for me, I saw this as a connection, not only to my love of being outdoors and by water, but also this connection of like why we're getting away, why like ways I wish I could have had that place to go away when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like I, put AirPods in or something and walk by the creek and listen to music,
Nice.
So
I love that you brought up the Adirondacks.
yes.
As a person from the middle of the country with no mountains nearby, really, being able to go to the Adirondacks regularly for me is amazing. My partner is from Saranac Lake.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So we've been up there a bunch of times. In the middle of the winter, we went for their winter carnival where they build a castle where they slice out blocks out of the frozen lake of Lake Flower, and they build a castle out of frozen lake blocks on the shore, and they have this like week-long festival in the middle of the winter.
That's amazing.
So we were up there when it was like minus 30 last winter for the winter carnival, and it was great. And then this past summer, we went up, and I was cycling in the mountains.
Yeah.
Like right there by Whiteface Mountain and Lake Placid and stuff like that, just riding up these mountain passes on my bike. And that for me is like that same kind of like peace, like those same feelings that you were just describing. Like that is like my thing. And I love that we both associate that feeling with like a similar region.
Yes.
In the state. Because like New York is so big and just such a massive place, and the variety of topography within this state is like completely mind-blowing.
But it's so funny that you say that because so we consider ourselves destination hikers. So I've never done any of the high peaks or anything. I don't have a ton of interest in it. I've also never spent any time there like in a hotel or a cabin or anything. So we've gone and we like, find spots on like the Northville Lake Placid Trail.
Yeah.
And you hike in from the trailhead like 5 miles and you try to get as far away from people as possible.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, you're like, all right, I got to find like the flattest way because I'm not going up and down this mountain for this trip, So it's so funny that like, just like the rivers where we don't really consider the fact that we have these gigantic, amazing bodies of water by us. I don't really think I think about the mountains as a nuisance.
Yeah.
Even though they're so beautiful in the distance, it's still like a means to an end.
You know what's so crazy? I'm just thinking about this right now. I went to Governor in upstate New York.
Okay.
A few months ago for a wedding, and when we were driving back from Governor, you drive down 81 like through Watertown and stuff like that, and you're basically running parallel to Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
On that side of upstate New York, and we pulled off to get gas or something, and we drove into this town that neither one of us had ever been to, and it takes you through the town to get to the gas station, and you know how annoying that is when you get off the highway and you have to like trek through a town, and like you're like, oh, I didn't know the gas station was gonna be 3 miles off the road, but it took us through this town in upstate New York, and I really wish I could remember the name of it, but we just drove over this bridge, and there were just like 50 people in the river in waders, and we went right over the bridge. It's right in the middle of town. There were all these people fishing, and we were like, what is this town? What is happening here? But we were blown away by what was going on in that little town.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember the name of it. Right off the 81, and dang, wish I could remember now.
And again, those are the areas that I'd love to live, but I don't think I could do it.
Yeah,
it's the wrong people around.
It's not for me either.
Yeah.
I need to visit and appreciate it in small doses, but then I need to come back to my little comfortable bubble here in my house with my cats and my kid.
That's perfect.
So what did you think about the drainage ditch aspect? Was that was originally what you envisioned whenever you were thinking about this song, like whenever you were first thinking about the lyrics?
I mean, again, just growing up next to the huge lake, when you hear of a drainage ditch, you're like, okay, it's like a stream. Yeah. So for me, it's still something that you can go and you are separated and in nature, but it's not as pronounced.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I mean, I've driven by those drainage ditches and I'm like, oh, that's a puddle.
Yeah.
So to change that and to think like, okay, here's this like kind of quiet corner where you can go and hang out by this area, but it's still like right next to a road.
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, in a prairie. I mean, it's wide open. We have nothing like that. So it's definitely like a different perspective, I think, but still the same feeling shared amongst those.
Yeah. I don't know I don't know if you have any experience about this, but like somewhere that I'm super curious about in Buffalo is like the road in like Tonawanda and Amherst on Ellicott Creek and Tonawanda Creek. Those roads that are just like people drive their boats up them.
It's horrific too, because I like to kayak those, and those boaters do not care.
Gotcha. But like, do you? So you know exactly what I'm talking about,
yes,
though.
Yep.
Like those areas are just like so cool to me, and I wish that I was like, I wish I had a house right on those creeks, and I'm just like, These look so amazing, but the boats ruin it.
They do, yes. And I don't know if you know this, Tonawanda Creek is the Erie Canal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, I mean, it kind of makes sense because of like the commerce aspect, but it does. You know, there's been times, there's a couple of parts where you can get out and, you know, when you're going down the creek, there's spots where there's no houses, no developments, and all of a sudden, like this big, like 3-tier boat comes around the corner, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. How far have you kayaked up that? Because like I've ridden all along it, like up through like Pendleton and stuff, and like as far as a long way.
I have put in at different points. I know there's like a kind of a trail thing where you could go and every couple miles there's a takeout. But what I usually do is I find a day when there's a good drift and I just go against it for as far as I can physically go.
And then turn around and float back.
Yep.
It's like me with tailwinds on my bike. I always look to see the wind directions of what's going on. And if there's a hard wind out of the southwest, which there often is in Buffalo because of the placement of it on Lake Erie, I'll ride straight into the wind from Snyder here where I live, straight into downtown. And then I will usually go like down through South Buffalo, around the Botanical Garden, and then I'll get a nice ripping tailwind, and I'll hit downtown again, and then I'll ride along the Niagara River on that bike path on the water, and then I'm just like seriously just going 20 miles an hour with a sweet tailwind all the way up under the Grand Island Bridge.
That's amazing.
All the way through Niawanda Park, and then you hit those UB bike paths, but you've just had a tailwind all the way from South Buffalo all the way up around the entire bike path up into like Ellicott Creek Park.
Right.
It's just so much fun.
And it's funny again, like thinking about that, like the Devil's Creek, the actual spot, the drainage ditch. Where we are very fortunate with like the Olmsted Park system where things are like built, and even like UB, like the parks around there's spots where it's built to make you feel like you're in nature.
Yep.
Like there's spots in Delaware Park where you can't see any development.
Yeah.
Just like along the Ellicott Creek Trail. I mean, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But for this, like you are flanked by development in every direction.
Yeah.
Even if it's, you know, only in a few, and it's a military base. But I don't know. It's a weird perspective change.
Great song. I love this one so much. Well, Griffin, what a great chat. I just love the fact that like I can learn about the local from you as well. You know, in this place that is like my new like adopted hometown, to connect, hang out, and learn from somebody who's super involved in the local scene through a couple of generations.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's awesome being able to connect and hang out a little bit. Do you want to promote any projects to the listeners out there and just remind everybody kind of like what you got going on and what you're excited about?
Yeah, so I don't have firm dates on anything, so I apologize about that. But keep an eye out. Selfish Act will have some sort of single with an original and a cover in January.
Cool.
We'll also have an EP by mid-year. G.O.A. has the No Effects thing coming out, and we're also going to be recording an EP sometime in early 2024.
What's your favorite song on that 5-song Selfish Act demo from 2023?
I love Kill YS. Which is another story. That was the first one. So when I write music, I grew up listening to like Fat Record stuff. So I wrote and learned a lot of those kind of songs. And when I started this, I had always loved hardcore, but I never learned it. So I'm trying to model some of the stuff that I listened to without knowing how to do those riffs. And that was the first one I wrote, and I'm like, okay, this is a cool riff, you know?
Yeah.
So I love that song. And yeah, I mean, I enjoy all those. They all have some sort of like, this is the first thing I've really like written and putting out there.
Yeah.
So they all have a special place, but that's definitely my favorite. Like, okay, I did a cool riff and I'm happy with this.
Amazing. Well, Griffin Coyne, thank you so much for coming over, hanging out in my house. These are some of my favorite kinds of conversations to do. I'm really getting into the whole in-person thing lately because the vibe is just like, it's just different when you don't have that Zoom recording crosstalk and things like that.
Yep.
So I am delighted to add you to my very limited amount of in-person conversations that I've done for this podcast over the years. It means a lot. Thanks for coming over.
Thank you very much. Yeah.